Russia's most advanced radar systems watched for threats in every direction, except their own reflection. Echo Trap, a twin 4-kilowatt emitter system hidden inside two Ukrainian MTLBs, turned Russia's electromagnetic shield into a weapon against itself. When the system fed back their jamming signals, missile operators went blind. Within minutes, a forest of false echoes concealed a swarm that changed the rules of modern warfare. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Russian radar crews were confident their jamming blanket made them untouchable. In their command rooms, layered scanners filled the airwaves with electronic noise, a shield meant to drown out any intruding signal. Miles away, two Ukrainian MTLBs crept toward a forest edge under blackout conditions. Their engines barely hummed. Inside the thin armored hulls, engineers watched frequency readings flicker, while Echo 1 and Echo 2 took position. Each machine carried a new type of electronic warfare module, twin 4-kilowatt emitters programmed not to jam, but to reflect. Once activated, the pair could bend captured frequencies and send them back with precise distortion, creating echoes designed to fool the most guarded Russian radar arrays. The operation depended on timing. Russia's multi-layer network stitched together dozens of radar stations and short-range jammers that overlapped across kilometers. No single system could be taken down directly. The entire grid had to be tricked into misreading its own data. Beyond the front line sat S-300 launchers, Pantsir units, and mobile jammers sweeping every known band. Echo Trap had to survive inside that electronic storm without broadcasting its identity. The Ukrainian engineers decided against direct interference. Instead of adding more noise, they used the enemy's power against itself, capturing the emitted signals, flipping their phase, and returning them in a way that made radar software think dozens of aircraft were maneuvering overhead. Signal reflection attacks rarely reach the battlefield because they demand synchronization on a millisecond scale. Echo 1 and Echo 2 relied on continuous encrypted telemetry, aligning their transmissions so that both vehicles produced a unified mirror field. The slightest delay would expose their coordinates. In the cramped compartments, technicians monitored frequency drift numbers climbing and falling as they tuned the array's coupling loops. The process was like holding two mirrors at just the right angle to create infinite reflections, except every reflection could be mistaken for an approaching missile squadron. Russian countermeasure systems were designed to spot standard jamming patterns, wide bursts, static pulses, false Doppler shifts. None of those clues appeared. On their screens, the pattern matched natural radar scattering, believable enough to trigger a defensive response against ghosts. As the synchronization stabilized, Echo Trap began to bend reality. Inside Russian control trailers, operators saw radar blooms expanding in random arcs. Each imagined target came from their own emissions, slightly delayed and scattered. To their instruments, it looked like a swarm of low-flying drones crossing into restricted airspace. Tracking software split and multiplied symbols faster than crews could label them. Within seconds, overlapping alarms blurred the screen. Jammers ramped up their output, feeding even more power into the loop, unaware that every extra watt made the illusion stronger. The Russian crew started arguing over whether the signal was real or an artifact, but their systems kept shouting warnings at them. The Ukrainian team watched the spectrum analyzer flatten. The thick layer of noise that once dominated the airwaves dropped as automated defenses entered their error cycle. Polarized beams folded on themselves, forming the electromagnetic blindfold the engineers had predicted. Echo Trap had turned a wall of protection into a mirror maze. For the first time, Russian operators faced the impossible task of separating their own reflections from legitimate data. The air defense grid continued transmitting, but it was staring into itself, trapped in its own feedback. The success unfolded quietly. No explosions, no visible sign that anything had changed, only screens betraying confusion hundreds of kilometers away. The synchronized vehicles maintained their output for under 10 minutes before going back to passive mode, leaving behind an empty frequency trail where once there had been interference. In that silence, Ukrainian controllers received the final signal. The corridor was open. Over the distorted frequencies drifted the first encrypted telemetry bursts from the waiting FPV swarm, lining up for a strike that would travel straight through the static. When the echoes folded back into silence, the sky above the convoy turned deceptively calm. Russian radar screens continued to loop phantom tracks, reflections of their own power, bouncing endlessly. Beneath that electronic fog, the ground crew saw nothing, heard nothing, and believed the airspace was clear. Yet 20 FPV drones waited less than 10 kilometers away, each armed and tethered to a hardened command hub. Their encrypted feeds pulsed through the same frequencies bending around the echo nodes. To the Russians, the corridor was static. To Ukraine's control grid, it was an open tunnel invisible to defense systems. The first drone launched with a faint buzz, climbing only a few meters meters before leveling out toward the faint heat signatures of fuel trucks lined along the Convoy road. Every route and altitude had been preloaded, but the swarm wasn't free-flying chaos. An AI-guided flight core analyzed data every 500ths of a second, adjusting for turbulence, radio drift, and the faint magnetic irregularities that the echo emitters produced. The drones rode the distortion like current through a wire, staying within the interference band that blinded radar sensors above them. Any movement outside that window risked detection. One wrong angle, one sudden burst of radar clarity, and the Pantsir systems would awaken. The Ukrainian controllers watched telemetry scroll, each line showing minor trajectory corrections, microsecond lags, and pressure readouts stable within margin. 6 minutes of airspace paralysis would have to be enough. About halfway through the run, one Russian jammer briefly came alive, attempting to sweep a defensive frequency. The surge lasted less than 10 seconds, but even that was enough to threaten exposure. The swarm's algorithms compensated, syncing to the new pulse and narrowing their signal envelope. Instead of being pushed out of the spectrum, they slipped through the side bands. This was not stealth in the traditional sense. Nothing was disappearing. The energy waves were still there. What changed was their interpretation. The difference lay between hiding and overwhelming. Electronic warfare suppression worked by forcing the opponent's sensors into overload, their internal filters jammed between competing priorities. The sky became a whiteout of data, so much information that it was useless. As the swarm reached striking distance, the Russian Pantsir S-1 units detected echoes resembling inbound targets and fired. Their automated systems had lost synchronization with the corrupted radar feed. 3 interceptor missiles streaked through open air, guided by coordinates already outdated by several seconds. Each missile veered off before reaching altitude, detonating on nothing visible. In the control cabins, operators attempted to re-establish network locks, but their own system reports contradicted each other. The false echoes appeared as swarms moving in every direction, drowning out any single point of reality. Meanwhile, the local RF grid collapsed under its own workload. The constant loop of spoofed radar pulses mixed with genuine drone telemetry until both merged into an indistinguishable haze. Receivers meant to isolate friendly command signals could no longer separate the pulse patterns. As the filters maxed out, antennas began to cycle into protection mode, reducing range in a desperate attempt to preserve hardware. That self-limiting reaction created a brief window of digital deafness. The swarm exploited it instantly. 10 drones barreled into the fuel trucks, their payload striking within 2-second intervals. 5 others dived toward missile trailers, vaporizing launchers before their crews could disconnect power lines. The rest aimed for the command jeeps that carried coordination equipment and encrypted radio relays. Echo Trap transformed the battlefield into a mirror maze. The attacker saw every signal, every reaction, while defenders stared into their own reflection. This operation proved that control over data could outweigh control over firepower. Ukraine's method exposed how precision algorithms and synchronized swarms could cripple billion-dollar defenses using tools that cost almost nothing. Intelligence observers called it the 5-minute miracle, a moment where sensor blindness defeated traditional strength. Future wars may follow this pattern, where electronic warfare decides victory before the first missile launches. The advantage now belongs to whoever can blind the other's data first and keep it that way.